All right, so what we're going to be making today is Italian wedding soup. And the first thing that I'm going to start with is the onion and the garlic that's going to go into the soup base. So not the little meatballs that are in it just yet. So I'm going to use this as an opportunity to just review how to cut an onion. Because for this soup, it really matters how the onion is cut. So we don't want big pieces, we want them very finely minced, and we don't want them to brown at all, so they're gonna sweat. Right? And when you look at an onion, it's gonna have the root side and the stem side. You wanna take the stem side off. Give yourself that flat foot, and then you're gonna cut through the root here by making that little cut, pushing down, reaching over. And now you have two flat sides, and I feel that it's usually easier to peel the onions at this stage. This is a sweet onion, which is kind of hard to peel. It's very thin to begin with. Okay, and I'll have my two flat halves here. And I want to do not really a mince, but a very fine dice. And there's a difference in doing a fine dice and putting it through like a food processor and making those very small cuts that way, because the more that you break the cells in the onion, the more flavor is going to come out of the onion, the more pungent it's going to be. Like grated onion is going to have a lot more flavor than diced onion. So we don't want to chop it up any old way and then go back with the knife. We want to make the cuts the best we can from the very beginning. So the onion has this little cheat guide on it that you're going to follow, and we're basically not going to cut from this side over because that whole root area is going to hold everything on. So I'm going to make my cuts. And the closer my knife goes, okay, I'm going to switch to the other side with my hand here. The closer each one of my cuts goes to itself, the finer it's going to be. So I have my first cut here, looks like that, right? And we have those layers in there that are going to help us. I'm going to lean with my hand on top of the knife and make a few more cuts this way, right? And on my last cut here, I'm going to hold this back area and make that fine dice. Okay, and you see everything should be uniform size. This is what I'm going for, about that size. Okay. And I'll get my onion in there. And there's going to be no onion in the meatball, just in the soup. But I am going to put a little bit of garlic in the soup and a little bit of garlic in the meatballs. So again, I have my half of the onion, and I'm just going to do my fine dice. Reach to the other side. Again, it looks like that. Lean on top. Hold that together on this side. And I'm making a fine cut. And you do have a little bit of onion left over here. You could use that for stocks, or you could chop that up, use it for something else. Okay, so now we see how nice and uniform that looks. Okay, so on the other hand, if I would have done this much bigger and then gone back and done kind of like rock and chop through it, the flavor of that would be completely different because you're breaking all those cells. So I have my onion all set, and now I want to do a little bit of garlic for the soup. So 1 clove of this garlic I'm going to put into the meatballs. So I'm going to put that aside. And the other garlic here I just took away from the head, the large head of garlic. And I'm going to use one of these bowls to smash it. A lot of the time you'll see you can lean on top of the knife. I don't love to do that with students just for safety reasons, and sometimes you don't have a big enough knife or whatever, so I think the back of a bowl works really great, and you just lean on top of it. Okay, and that'll come right off. Same with garlic as with onion. The more you cut it up, the more flavor that's going to come out. So I'm not going to be browning this garlic. It's going to kind of be steaming in a way with these onions. So I don't want to go too fine on it because then it'll be a really pungent flavor. I'm just taking off that little root part. So I'm going to leave these relatively big. so that's going to be my garlic and my onion for the soup. All right. Now for the meatballs. You could use any kind of meat that you like, ground pork, ground beef. This is ground chicken. I've done it with turkey, right? So I have a pound here. To that, I'm just going to move it off to the side there so I don't end up mixing it up too much, because the more you mix it, the tougher it'll get. I'm just going to mix 1 egg with about a teaspoon of salt and some freshly ground pepper. I have about a tablespoon of minced parsley. I'm going to add about a 1/4 cup of Parmesan or Pecorino Romano cheese. See all this mixing that gets done on the side here beforehand, before you mix in the meat. And lately I've been adding tomato paste, and I really love the tomato paste in this. All right, and I'm going to mix this up. And I'm not even going to add a whole garlic clove to this, because it can be really overwhelming since it's going in raw. And all that's going to happen with these meatballs, they don't get browned first. They're going to boil in there. Actually, we're going to go to great lengths to try not to boil them. We're going to bring it up to a very, very, very slow simmer, because as soon as it boils, the little particles of meat break off and they go in the soup and they make it all cloudy. It still tastes good, but it doesn't look as pretty. And I'm going to take my little bowl of garlic over here. And this one I'm going to mince really fine, because I don't want big pieces in there, but I don't want too much. I'm only going to do 1/2 clove. Some people like a little bit more. Give a little bit for a little bit of flavor. And I'm mixing this entire thing up before I'm adding my breadcrumbs. Okay? And I have about 1/2 cup of plain breadcrumbs, no seasoning, because we already put all those great seasonings in ourselves. Now, Italian wedding soup usually has some sort of green. It can be spinach. I love escarole, and that's what we will be using today. So my meatball mixture is good here. I'm going to put this off to the side. Okay, so now for the escarole. So I chopped this all up on the cutting board, cleaned it afterwards, but escarole is really sandy. And what you have to do with escarole and any leafy green that's really dirty is you have to float it, meaning you're going to put it into a salad spinner or a bowl, and you want to lift it out of that water. If you were to then turn it and dump it, right, instead of lifting it out, you're pouring all the dirt right back on top of it. So I did this about 3 times. Now, if this was a salad or something like this, I'd want to spin it dry, but it's going to go into a soup, so it's fine. Okay, so here's my escarole, and I clean it until I make sure that there's no sand on the bottom anymore. Right, so that's going to be our soup base. So our soup base is pretty simple. So it's going to be this finely diced onion, the garlic, olive oil, the escarole, and then some chicken broth, which you'll see. But the main event is the meatballs. So while I'm simmering the onions, garlic, and the escarole, I usually make the meatballs. So I like to use this tiny disher, but you could use very patient hands. Make these, and I like to plop these in right into the broth when it first goes in, so the soup isn't even hot when it goes in. And the point of that, again, is to make sure that these meatballs don't break apart. It makes just for a prettier soup. So I'm just going to keep going until all those are done. Start sauteing and serve this with a little bit of small pasta on the side and some crusty bread and Parmesan cheese on top. And just make sure, give it a check and make sure that they reach 100, at least 165. That they're well above that and they're good to go. And the pasta's all cooked. I cooked that separately because it really does absorb so much If you're gonna freeze this soup too, it's really a good idea to make sure that everything's cold first, because the pasta will actually start to take on the color of that escarole, and it's not as pretty. And some Parmesan cheese.